40 whacks with a heavy blade, or the greatest miscarriage of justice in American history. Tonight, we dissect the morning that shattered the quietude of Fall River, Massachusetts. Nova, After Dark. Tonight, you will step back into the sweltering heat of August 1892 to a Victorian home where 2 lives were ended in a flurry of violence. We will meticulously piece together the movements of Lizzie Borden, a woman who remains trapped between the labels of a grieving daughter and a cold-blooded killer. The morning of August the 4th, 1892, in Fall River, Massachusetts, began with an oppressive, stifling heat. It was the kind of summer day where the air felt heavy, thick with the scent of coal smoke and impending humidity. In the quiet, respectable neighborhood of 2nd Street, the Borden house stood as a testament to the family's substantial wealth. Andrew Borden was a man of significant influence, a banker who had built his fortune through hard work and undeniable frugality. His wife, Abby, managed the household, while Lizzie and her older sister, Emma, lived as daughters of a household strained by unspoken grievances. The relationships within these walls were far from the Victorian ideal of familial warmth. Lizzie, at 32, was an unmarried woman trapped in a life of stifling expectations and paternal dominance. She was intelligent, perhaps frustrated by the rigid social structure of the time, and known to have a difficult relationship with her stepmother, Abby. The friction between them was a known fact among the neighbours, who often whispered about the tensions behind the drawn curtains. As the sun rose higher, casting long, sharp shadows across the floorboards, nobody could have predicted that the mundane rhythm of a Thursday morning would be forever broken. The house was not a place of joy, but one of careful, deliberate maintenance and quiet resentment. Andrew had left for his business errands, expecting to return to a normal lunch. Meanwhile, the household staff, around 10:45 a.m., the silence of the house was shattered by the frantic screams of Lizzie Borden. She claimed to have discovered her father, Andrew, dead in the sitting room, his face unrecognizable and his body bearing the marks of a brutal assault. The scene was visceral, shocking, and profoundly confusing to the first responders who arrived on the scene. Shortly after, the discovery of Abby Borden's body upstairs only deepened the mystery, as she too had been struck multiple times by a sharp, heavy instrument. The brutality of the attacks left the small community of Fall River in a state of absolute terror and disbelief. People gathered outside the residence, pressing their faces against the perimeter, hoping for answers that were not yet forthcoming. The police, led by inexperienced local officers, began to scramble through the house, leaving footprints and disturbing evidence. It was a chaotic scene, lacking the scientific rigor of modern investigation, which would prove to be a massive hurdle. Lizzie, meanwhile, stood as the center of this storm, her demeanor described as inconsistent by some, while others saw it as the paralysis of deep trauma. She spoke of being in the barn or perhaps in the garden, but her stories seemed to shift, raising immediate questions. The instruments of the crime were nowhere to be found, and the lack of a blood-drenched weapon left the authorities chasing shadows. Every corner of the house held a secret, and the investigators were ill-equipped. As the investigation progressed, the spotlight fell squarely on Lizzie Borden. Her lack of distress during the immediate aftermath of the murders was noted by several witnesses and officers on the scene. She appeared composed, almost detached, which struck many as being highly unnatural for a daughter who had just lost her parents. Her testimony during the inquest provided a series of inconsistencies, as she struggled to recall her exact whereabouts during the critical window of time. Furthermore, the discovery that she had attempted to purchase prussic acid, a potent poison, only days before the murders cast a dark cloud over her character. Was this a premeditated plan, or a series of unfortunate misunderstandings? The prosecution argued that the motive was rooted in inheritance and the growing resentment she felt toward her father and stepmother. They painted a picture of a woman stifled by her environment and desperate to break free from the control of her father. Lizzie's supporters, however, argued that she was a pious woman, active in her church, and incapable of such savage violence. They pointed to the lack of blood evidence on her clothing, claiming that such a messy crime would have left obvious traces on whoever performed it. Yet the investigators found a dress that Lizzie claimed had been stained with paint, and later, a scorched dress that she insisted she had destroyed because it was ruined. These details became the building blocks of a case that would capture this. The trial of Lizzie Borden was nothing short of a theatrical spectacle. Held in the grand halls of the courthouse, it attracted the cream of the legal profession and an army of reporters. The prosecution presented a formidable case, weaving together threads of motive, opportunity, and the defendant's own erratic statements. They brought in experts to analyze the blood patterns and the weapons, though the forensics of the era were notoriously imprecise. The defense, meanwhile, was equally formidable, portraying Lizzie as an innocent victim of circumstantial evidence and a biased police force. They emphasized the fact that no witness had actually seen her commit the act, and the weapons were never definitively linked to her hands. The trial became a cultural flashpoint, pitting traditional values against the emerging complexities of the modern criminal justice system. Throughout the proceedings, Lizzie sat silently, her face a mask of stoic resolve. She rarely spoke, letting her lawyers articulate the defense she could not or would not voice herself. The jury, comprised entirely of men, listened to weeks of testimony, much of it contradictory and emotionally charged. The pressure from the public was immense, with local sentiment heavily divided between those who saw a monster and those who saw a maligned woman. The judge presided over the courtroom with a heavy gavel, struggling to maintain order in a space saturated with anticipation. Every day, the courtroom was packed to the... As the deliberation began, the city of Fall River held its collective breath. The trial had been a marathon of arguments, yet the evidence remained fundamentally circumstantial. There was no murder weapon that could be indisputably linked to the scene, and the absence of clear blood evidence on Lizzie herself proved to be the Achilles heel of the prosecution. The defense's insistence that a stranger could have committed the crime while far-fetched offered just enough reasonable doubt to complicate the jury's decision. The jury deliberated for a relatively short time, considering the gravity of the accusations. When they returned, the atmosphere in the room was electric, a palpable tension that seemed to freeze time. The foreman stood, his voice trembling slightly as he delivered the verdict that would echo through history. Not guilty. The acquittal was met with a mixture of cheers and gasps, reflecting the deep divide that had characterized the trial from the beginning. Lizzie Borden was a free woman once again, though she would never truly be exonerated in the public imagination. The verdict did little to dispel the rumors, and if anything, it only fueled the legends that would surround her for the rest of her life. She moved to a new home, Maplecroft, and attempted to live as a quiet socialite, but the ghost of that morning in August was a permanent guest. The legal outcome was the end of the case, but it was merely the beginning of the mystery. The question of who had. The aftermath of the trial was a long, slow study in isolation. Lizzie Borden lived the rest of her life in Fall River, but it was not the life of a popular socialite she might have dreamed of. She was a pariah, respected for her money, but shunned for her reputation. Her relationship with her sister Emma, once her only ally, eventually fractured beyond repair, leading to a permanent estrangement. She spent her days surrounded by her pets and her luxuries, but she was always looking over her shoulder, aware of the whispers that trailed her wherever she went. The case itself became a fixture in American folklore, a grisly nursery rhyme repeated by children, turning a real tragedy into a macabre myth. Researchers and true crime enthusiasts would spend the next century dissecting the case, creating an industry of books, articles and documentaries, all searching for the real killer. Some pointed to the maid, some to a secret lover, and others to an unknown intruder. But every theory ultimately led to more dead ends. The Borden case became a masterclass in the difficulties of Victorian-era policing, a warning about how easily evidence could be contaminated and how powerful biases could steer the course of justice. Even today, if you visit the site in Fall River, you can feel the heavy atmosphere of a mystery that refuses to sleep. The house itself has been preserved, a chilling monument to the day that the Borden family was forever extinguished. It stands as a reminder that ultimately the case of Lizzie Borden remains one of the most enduring enigmas in the annals of American history. It is a story not just of a crime, but of a society in transition, struggling with the limitations of its own systems and the weight of its own morality. We may never know for certain what happened behind those closed doors, but the act of remembering is, in its own way, a form of justice. By questioning the narrative, by challenging the assumptions, we keep the truth alive, even if it is a truth that may never be fully grasped. The Borden house today stands as a place of intrigue, a destination for those who are drawn to the dark side of the human condition. As we look back, we must strive to balance the sensationalism of the crime with the respect due to the victims, whose lives were stolen in an act of profound cruelty. The trial was a circus, but the reality was a tragedy. Through the lens of time, we see a woman defined by her actions, or her lack thereof, standing in the shadow of a guilt that was never formally assigned. As you process the facts and the rumours, consider the human cost of such a mystery and the way it continues to shape our understanding of justice and innocence. The case is closed legally, but in the minds of the public, the investigation is eternal. We are all witnesses to the past, peering through the glass at a tragedy that is both distant and uncomfortably close, forever questioning what really happened that sweltering August morning. Lizzie Borden walked free, but the shadows of Fall River never truly lifted from her name. What do you believe? Was she a victim of a patriarchal legal system, or did she expertly manipulate the evidence to escape the consequences of her actions? Tell us your theory in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the dark. This is Nova After Dark, signing off.